Good morning and welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System.
Half-Life is one of the most influential games ever made, and from the first second it makes you feel like you are Gordon Freeman. The game literally starts with you taking the train to go to work. This train ride here changed game storytelling forever, but I will skip it now because I already played this game like 100 times. Gordon Freeman is a vessel for your own insanity. You can do whatever you want in this game. You can even prank people like a low-tier 2010s YouTuber. This is the Black Mesa cafeteria.
Most of the simulation results are perfectly acceptable, you know.
And here, by gently pressing E on the microwave, you can do this.
My God, what are you doing?
This is one of the most well-remembered Easter eggs in the game, and with good reason. It's funny and it shows you how you can actually interact with literally everything in the game. It was remade by fans in Black Mesa, and it is even part of the lore, because in episode 2 you meet the scientist to which you just ruined the lunch here. Now, everybody just thinks that this is a joke, a well-written joke. I mean, we know how much Valve loves cafeterias. There is an entire documentary about their cafeteria.
We have just about every form of concentrated caffeine ever invented.
But what if I told you that this is actually a reference to frustrated Microsoft Windows software developers? Wait, what? This is Hard Drive, and it's a biography about how Bill Gates managed to become a self-made billionaire. Actually, his mom knew people at IBM, but don't tell anyone. If you go to page 268 of that book, you actually find a few anecdotes of Microsoft employees making bombs to kill time. And then you find an actual description of a very specific event.
In an attempt to amp up the power of the homemade explosives, one young programmer came up with a plan to melt the sugar in the cafeteria's microwave oven to give the mixture more kick. The fuel ignited while it was brewing, blowing up the oven and sending a plume of smoke throughout the building.
That sounds familiar. A few of the top employees at Microsoft are mentioned there, including the Madman, which is this tester for Windows, which started just sleeping in office and working all day in order to make sure that Windows was shipped in time. And we actually know the name of this madman. It's Gabe Newell. The same Gabe Newell that in '96 will co-found Valve, a company mostly made of ex-Microsoft employees that will, 2 years later, in '98, release the game Half-Life, where this exact thing happens. And apparently I'm the first person in 25 years to notice this. I could have made a TikTok saying, "Hey guys, I just discovered this awesome thing. I'm the first one," and just make views like that with no effort. But no, this is not how we roll here. We need to go Gaber. Right now, Gabe Newell is essentially the Reggie of PC gaming. Everybody knows him for Valve, for Half-Life, for Steam. Oh yeah, he was also Ringo in the Beatles, but he only founded Valve when he was 36, and he was already a millionaire. And now, just taking a look for a second, we discover he was sleeping in office, he was involved in
Allegedly
making homemade bombs. So in this video, starting from this point, I want to answer to a simple question. What did he do before founding Valve? How did he become a millionaire? In other words, what made Gabe? I actually printed this using the CAT printer, which makes this way less dramatic than it seemed. The year is 1983, and the place is Harvard. And if we go to Harvard, metaphorically, because I'm way too broke for that, we find a brilliant young student named Gabe. And he's here because, in theory, if you're good at math or computer science, Harvard is the place to be. However, the reality of things was kinda different.
At Harvard, I learned how to drink beer while doing a handstand in the snow, which is a useful skill to have, but not nearly as useful as learning how to actually develop software.
So one day, Gabe decides to take a few days off and pay a visit to his older brother, Dan. Dan had just been hired by a startup in Seattle, so Gabe figured out he could both see his brother and check out what the city of iCarly and Frasier had to offer. But the problem is that Dan was a workaholic, so he actually just ended up hanging out in his brother's office. Which actually was a blessing in disguise, because his brother was working for Microsoft. This was early Microsoft, founded by two college dropouts, and in '83 they just started working on this new project, which was a graphical interface for their Microsoft DOS operating system. You might know this because it's called Windows. Just hanging out around these guys felt like heaven to Gabe. He was just stopping every single person he met, asking what they were working on, and he was learning more there than in college. But after a bit, he started pissing off the sales manager, which was wandering around the offices. You might know this guy, he's Steve Ballmer.
Developers.
Ballmer was a bit annoyed by Gabe, so he basically told him that if he wanted to be there, he had to do something useful. Doing something useful. So, just like that, Gabe joins Microsoft, learning a lot, doing his best, becoming the madman, and during the 80s just climbing the corporate ladder, becoming one of the main producers for Windows. And since he was one of the earliest employees of the company, he actually got a lot of stock options when Microsoft finally went public in '86. But he wasn't that interested in investing stocks. He actually had a good salary run, and he just loved working for this competitive, innovative, and just fun Microsoft of the 80s, where employees made microwaves explode. But then Microsoft changed.
10 years later.
By 1993, Gabe was now 31, and he had been working on Microsoft for 10 years. And the company was literally becoming the biggest one in the world. By 1995, Bill Gates would be the richest man in the world, and Windows would run on 80% of computers worldwide. So Gabe was now a rich, powerful man. But was he happy?
No.
When he joined, he was employee number 271, and they were always on the edge of something new. While now they control the market, they literally decided what was worth buying and what was obsolete. And this made Gabe feel a bit like when he was in Harvard. Like, yes, he was technically in the best place he could be in, but he was bored. Do you know this show named The Simpsons? If you don't, then how? If something is referenced in The Simpsons, then you know it is mainstream culture by now. And there is this episode where Homer makes a company named
Compute Global Hyper Meganet.
which is nothing, it does nothing, it's just trying to profit off the dot-com bubble. But Bill Gates calls him and wants to acquire the company, and this happens.
Buy 'em out, boys!
If The Simpsons are making a parody of how you handle business, then it is probably widely known that you're doing something wrong. And Gabe was a huge deal at this company that was destroying everyone else. But then, all of a sudden, in December of 1993, something happened. A company based in Texas, out of nowhere, puts out a piece of software that was so important, so huge, that by 95 will become more installed than Windows itself. It was this huge. So with Gabe being this bored and like one of the main people behind Windows, he had to see what the fuss was about. Why was this software so good? And the name of this software was Doom. Gabe Newell was not the same man after trying Doom. He started bringing a laptop with him with a copy of the game installed to show people that fast 3D gaming was now finally possible on computers. I want to remind you, there were no 3D graphics cards yet. The first Doom runs entirely on the CPU. John Carmack, one of the lead programmers, was obsessed with this book named The Zen of Assembly Language, and believed in it so much he made this shit work. And music too was revolutionary in the game, because dedicated sound cards were not really a thing either. But since Doom was able to connect to MIDI interfaces, you could actually listen to industrial metal while slaying demons. Gabe wanted in on this, and he first tried to have Bill Gates acquire id Software, to which Bill said no, because he was a serious businessman. So what Gabe did was he scared Bill Gates into porting Doom to Windows. The original version of Doom was running on DOS, which means people had to get out of Windows to play the game. And less time spent on Windows meant less reasons to buy Microsoft software. So when Gates realized he was potentially losing some pesos here, he told Gabe to call id and ask for authorization to make a port of Doom to Windows.
Hello, this is Gabe Newell. I am calling from Microsoft. We wanted to ask you if you would be interested in our company porting your game to Windows, for free, of course.
Id obviously said yes, because who would say no to an optimized port made for free? And this was Gabe's plan all along. Since id said yes, Gabe was now in charge of the team porting Doom from MS-DOS to Windows 95. which means he would be paid by Microsoft to hang around at id Software. He would keep his stability, but also take a look at how games worked, just out of curiosity, of course. When Gabe got to visit id, he noticed that not every company had to be uptight or business obsessed. It was a way more chill place, and this came mostly from the fact that the founders were tired of being constantly controlled by higher-ups. They were making games because it was cool. And then this also made money, but that wasn't really the main thing. John Romero was defined the first gaming rockstar for a reason. After the success of Doom, id was growing, but there were still a bunch of guys trying to make cool stuff. They weren't trying to maximize profits. They were very involved with their community, and they would gladly explain to people how their games worked, which was the opposite of the Microsoft of the 90s. They were a monopoly that was super closed and was trying to destroy everything open. Gabe was becoming addicted to this doing cool shit, and he was seriously considering just quitting Microsoft and trying to do this, but he didn't know if he was actually up to the task or not, until something magical happened. Do you remember that book I mentioned? The Zen. That one. Yeah, the guy who wrote it was now working at it, and he also knew Gabe because they worked together at Microsoft. This man is named Michael Abrash. He's currently the chief scientist of Oculus, and in 1996 he had just been hired by id to work on their next game, Quake. And he straight up told Gabe to quit Microsoft and make games.
Abrash, a friend of mine, had gone from Microsoft to id. He was one of Carmack's programming heroes. And the two of them said to myself and Mike Harrington, hey, you guys should stop working at Microsoft and start a games company.
Okay. Who the f*** is Mike Harrington now? Well, according to the final hours of Half-Life 2...
Mike Harrington was one of Gabe's old buddies from Microsoft. Gabe was the ambitious dreamer, and Mike was the practical realist who liked the ship product, as he often told friends.
Mike had joined Microsoft 3 years after Gabe, and before that he worked at a company named Dynamics, making video games, so he actually knew a lot about the industry. Just like Gabe, he was a millionaire because of stock options, and just like Gabe, he was quite bored of working at Microsoft. So when Gabe tried to ask him if he was maybe interested in making a game company with him, he didn't just say yes, but he also told Gabe that his wife Monica would like to do that too, since just like them, she also worked at Microsoft. Wow, so out of curiosity, Gabe now managed to get two people potentially wanting to maybe open a game company and do cool shit. And Gabe had just a plan in mind. But first, before even thinking about making his own company, Gabe had business to conclude at Microsoft. So he checked in with the Doom 95 project to see if they needed him, but they were actually fine. Gabe wasn't involved with the actual programming of the port. They actually had their own lead, which was a man named Alex St. John. More on that later. So in July of 96, Gabe and Mike took the plunge and left Microsoft to try and act upon Gabe's plan that could potentially make this game idea work. So they cash out part of their stocks, they take the money, and they go to Texas, precisely to id. And with the stance of a cowboy, they ask, hey, can we please use your engine, the Quake one? Please, we can pay, we have money, please. Of course, the reaction by the id guys was not good. The people behind Microsoft Bob and Excel wanted to get their engine to make a game. But here, the Deus Ex Machina. Michael Abrash decides to vouch for them and managed to convince the cabal at id that they would actually use that engine well. They weren't losers. Yes, they worked for Microsoft, okay, but they were actually cool guys, and they would make a cool game. So, after this Michael talk, Gabe and Mike officially get a license for the Quake engine. After paying an undisclosed amount of money for the license, they come back from Texas with the source code to the best game engine on the market so far. Having a ready game engine that would just modify to fit their needs would significantly cut the time for development of a game. There is a reason why every single game you see right now is made in either Unreal or Unity. Developing a game engine from scratch is a pain in the ass. I have to remind you, PC gaming was new. There were no real software development kits. When you were developing a video game in the 90s, you had to consider every possible piece of hardware that said game would run on, because there was no middle layer doing it for you. So despite having this game engine, Gabe and Mike had a lot of work to do in order to make their future game run on consumer hardware. And it was now August of '96. They had the rights to the engine, but they hadn't made a company yet. Yes, they were doing this, but it was still very scary. But then, on August 20, good news arrived. From Microsoft of all places. Because on August 20, Doom 95, the project that Bill was convinced by Gabe to make, was released, and nobody really cared too much about it. It was a port of a 3-year-old game you could just play by rebooting into DOS. But there was something more interesting that came with it. And if you were a developer, this was the real news. Along with Doom 95, there was this piece of software development kit that people could use to easily port or just make games from scratch for Windows. This would handle automatically the hardware combination, the compatibility. You just had to use this layer and it would do the work for you. This piece of software was written by Alex St. John and it was called DirectX. Yes, the one we still use today. It was born right here. And you can imagine how huge this news was for Gabe and Mike. They overnight just had the development time for their future game of their future startup cut by more than half. They could just do stuff now. So 4 days later, Gabe finally made a very risky business decision, marrying his wife. But on the same day, along with Mike Harrington, he co-founded Valve Software. But now it was time to hire the employee. Wait, I think it's time we stop here because I'm getting into the story of Half-Life, and if I have to talk about the development of Half-Life, I could just... Oh yeah, do you remember that Alex St. John guy that I mentioned, the DirectX guy? He believed in this DirectX project so much, he actually wanted to make a box just to play games, a DirectX... Oh... Yeah, I actually co-wrote a video on the story of the Xbox. You can find it on the Low Spec Gamer channel right now. But first, here's a special outro for you. Because, I don't know. Gabe on the floor, where he come from, nobody knows where he'll go. Oh, Gabe on the floor, where he come from, nobody knows where he'll go. Oh.